Most people will tell you that comedy is subjective. Those people are wrong. Your taste in comedy is subjective, but there are still fundamentally good and bad jokes. It's kind of like food. A chef could make an incredible mushroom soup, but someone who doesn't like mushrooms probably just won't enjoy it. But pretty much everyone will agree that raw chicken with some paprika and orange juice poured on top is a terrible meal. Unless you're some sort of freak, I don't know. But much like in cooking, there are formulas and recipes that you can use to help you craft that perfect joke. Different ingredients prepared in different ways, being added and prepared at just the right moment in just the right way, until you serve a perfectly oven-baked punchline that lingers in your audience's minds for years, even when that audience is just a single person. If the stand-up comedy show is a 5-course banquet, then the one-liner that your friend makes is a delicious, sweet candy bar. And when you start breaking down comedy with this weird food analogy, you begin to shine a spotlight on just how difficult it is to really be funny. But in a video game, unless it's a scripted sequence, you have next to no control over timing. Yes, you can try and guide the player along an intended path at an intended pace, but nothing is stopping them from just standing still or walking somewhere else. Trying to apply most conventional comedy practices just risks ruining whatever joke you might have planned. Hell, you could lay out all the setup for a joke and the player could just somehow miss the punchline entirely. Donkey Kong Bonanza has a great joke like this. Throughout the game you can find notes left behind by a legendary explorer who went on this amazing journey to the centre of the earth. And when you finally reach the end of their journey, the final note reads, "Here lies Exploratone, the adventurer. May they rest peacefully in this land." Presumably as a grave, it's the tragic and familiar end to many stories of explorers. Except if you break through the floor, you can just find the Exploratone resting quite comfortably in their bed. It's a quick, subversive punchline that the whole game has been building up to, which you can also miss entirely. A big reason for why this works so well is that the final note that you find is the only one that's integral to understanding the joke. Every other note that you found building up to this is just that. It's building it up, it's setting it up, it's adding some more flavour to it. But then there is also the fact that you can just dig through the floor before reading the final note and completely ruin the intended flow, thus kind of ruining the joke. The core of the joke is still rigid and breaks when delivered in the wrong order, but everything building up to it is more flexible. And the fact that you can miss the joke entirely also helps aid in how well it works. Without the punchline, it works as a rewarding conclusion to a plot thread that you follow throughout the entire game. With the punchline, it works as a joke and as a fun secret that further rewards the player for exploring every facet of the level, something which the entire video game encourages. That combination of exploration and comedy is something that only video games can really excel at. But it also means that relying on more long-form comedy, jokes that take time to pay off, are a risky play. It's probably why a lot of in-game jokes are brief one-liners or environmental background jokes. Environmental jokes are a significant advantage that video games have over every other form of media. You can pack a whole scene with so many just tiny, minuscule little jokes for the player to find at their own pace. One game that does this especially well is Another Crab's Treasure, released by Aggro Crab back in 2024. Another Crab's Treasure is a game where you play as a crab exploring a polluted ocean floor, full of locales covered in literal garbage. The game is very funny all round, but the environment artists especially excel with how they use the pieces of literal garbage for comedic purposes. with some jokes being more obvious than others. You can find them on popsicle sticks that you hit out of the ground, you can find references to memes on plastic waste, same with stupid marketing gimmicks. But my favourite one in the whole game is simply what happens when you scan this QR code, which you can find printed on cardboard boxes around the city. Go ahead. I'll give you a moment to scan it if you want. Take your time. And this garbage influence extends to a number of the enemies too. Pistol shrimp get paper cowboy hats and become sharpshooters, using can rings as crosshairs to aim. An electric eel uses a vibrator as a weapon, using its electricity to power it. The silence crab meme is an enemy in one of the later areas, and it's simultaneously hilarious and terrifying, behaving something like the Guardians from Breath of the Wild, but instead of the high-pitched ticking sounds, they have rotary phones that start ringing as their attack charges. I gotta calm down before this becomes an Another Crab's Treasure video. I just love this game so much. It is so shining with creativity. Even the loading screens are funny. And what's great about so many of these jokes is that they're not just there to be funny, they're adding to the game. A lot of the jokes are adding to a lot of the game's themes around environmentalism and how kind of fucked up the oceans have become. Rampant capitalism has ravaged the ocean floor in so many ways, and the jokes draw attention to that. They enhance the game's message in ways that feel entirely natural. The loan shark being a plastic shark toy is so conceptually silly that you don't even question how it can be very easily read as a metaphor for how capitalism is poisoning the ocean and ruining existence for humans and animals that just want to be left alone. But as much as I love Another Crab's Treasure, seriously, I really love this game, we still have a similar situation to Donkey Kong Bonanza. The jokes that exist outside of scripted sequences are mostly told in a single moment, and as far as I could find, there aren't really any jokes that are gradually set up and paid off entirely through gameplay. Probably because player freedom means the freedom to miss potentially crucial setup. Every joke that isn't a line of unmissable dialogue is still a joke where all of the crucial elements exist in that moment. The only time this isn't the case is when making a reference to something outside of the game. This isn't a bad thing though, more so an observation of how jokes are adapted to the format. Developers can only guide the player, they can't control them, so they have very little influence over the timing of the joke. This means that quick, short, bite-sized jokes are the kind that are just the best suited to video games, because you don't have to worry about the player missing the setup or the punchline when it's all contained in a single moment. If the player does miss a setup, then they'll get to the punchline and they'll just be confused. They'll wonder what the fuck is going on. That being said, it's still possible to set up a joke and not pay it off until significantly later. As long as you account for it, you can hit the punchline basically whenever. And one series that does this especially well is the Yakuza series with its sub-stories. You can just be walking around the world and you will randomly get roped into helping some random guy sell mushrooms in a back alley. Not even magic mushrooms, just regular old fungus. The subversion is kind of funny on its own, but the fact that you can just randomly stumble into this, like with virtually every other sub-story, adds to the absurdity. So, naturally, people keep expecting the mushrooms they purchase in a back alley to be narcotics, which inevitably results in conflict when they aren't. As you gradually progress through the game and check in with the seller though, the joke progresses further. One thing he does to try and make people think that he's a legitimate mushroom seller is using a theme song. The problem with this plan though is that it's stupid, so it doesn't work, but the joke does. Even though it's been anywhere from 10 minutes to 20 hours of gameplay in between stages of the ongoing joke, it still works. it can induce a similar sort of feelings of randomly seeing someone you went to school with show up on your socials because of some strange event of absurdity. You haven't thought about them in years, and now they're at the forefront of your mind in such a bizarre way. It leans into that sense of strange familiarity. Throughout the series, the most consistently absurd part of all this is simply that you will just stumble upon so many of these. And whilst Yakuza's many adaptations have chosen to omit these sub-stories, likely deeming them unnecessary, their existence is so integral to the identity of the series and the characters. Omitting them results in a feeling of emptiness. The fact that something silly is always happening adds so much to the world and the characters. If the sub-stories were all as serious as the main plot, you'd question why anybody would even spend a second in Kamurocho. But it's that absurdity and how it can just happen out of nowhere which explains to you why people are drawn here. Despite it all being relegated to the side content, the comedic tone found here is integral to the series in a way that a TV show or a movie can simply never capture. Though a large factor in all the examples I've shown so far is still a script, a structure, an order in which events must always play out. An unrelated number of things could happen between any two of those events, but those two events must always happen in the same order. The structure of the joke will be the exact same on every single playthrough of the game. And honestly, this is fine. Jokes rely heavily on structure, and as I said at the start, comedy is very difficult. Every ingredient needs to be added at just the right moments in just the right way. But there's one factor that video games have over every other art form, and that's the interactivity. Games can let you explore and experiment in ways that a movie or a novel simply can't, which is why sometimes it's good to give the player all of the ingredients and just let them make their own comedy. So many games just let players loose with a veritable sandbox full of toys to play with. Halo is famous for that sandbox, giving you so many weapons, vehicles, equipment and objects to just mess around with. Likewise, turning items on in Smash Bros makes for a chaotic mesh of party and fighting game. Doing stupid shit with friends in video games can be hilarious because the developers decided to just simply give you the ingredients to make your own recipe. And the rise of online games, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic, has seen a number of developers lean into that in so many new ways. Some of the biggest examples of these are cooperative multiplayer games, often unfairly labelled as friendslop. Peak, once again by AgroCrab, in a team-up with Landfall, is probably the biggest, most recent example of these. The goal of Peak is simple. Climb to the top of the mountain, either alone or with your friends. The developers could have just stopped right there and had the entire gameplay loop be just about managing your stamina meter and nothing else. But that wouldn't be very funny. So the developers added ways for the players to interact with each other. Grabbing hands to pull each other up is a quick and simple act that they can do at virtually any time. It feels snappy but also janky and awkward. The game's physics are trying to keep the players' hitboxes from overlapping, whilst also pulling them together. Usually you can just grab them again and carry on as normal, but every so often it results in disaster.
This is gonna be close. Thank you. No, wait! Oh.
But the fact that this can happen likely isn't an accident. The developers could probably make it so that this never happens, but silly physics interactions between players and the environment are so heavily ingrained into Peak's appeal. You can see it even more with several of the game's items and how they lean into these physics and slightly awkward controls. The cannon is an excellent example. You only get a general idea of the direction it'll launch you as it's being placed down. You don't hit a button and find yourself riding inside the cannon. You have to manually light it and climb in using the game's collision and awkward movement controls. It's silly, it's cumbersome, and it's hilarious. You only have a general idea of where you're going to end up. So combined with the slapdash approach of how you get there, and you have a chaos of your own making. You haven't ordered a finely cooked meal from a chef. You've purchased the ingredients from the store and followed a recipe. But the beauty of following a recipe at home is that you can put your own twists on it. You can get creative. You can do things that were never imagined by the people who originally made it. Which ends up in different results, different interactions with different people, so that the jokes can be whatever you find funny. All social interaction games allow for this in different ways. Lethal Company throws horror into the mix, upping the tension as you and your friends constantly try not to panic. Social deduction games like Among Us and Town of Salem throw distrust into things, so you're always trying to gaslight each other. These games don't need to make jokes because they've given you everything you need to craft your own. Sure, sometimes the developers put something in the game with a certain interaction in mind, but usually what's intended is far from the only possibility being opened up, and I love that. The stories and jokes being crafted are fueled by the dynamic nature of how a video game can be experienced, without limiting it to the ideas that the people working on it could come up with. At the time of me making this video, I'd say that social games are probably the best place to look for video games that utilise the medium's comedic potential the most. That's not to say that other games can't be funny. Every single game I've spoken about in this video is funny, and even more games that I haven't spoken about in this video are funny. Hypnospace Outlaw takes that explorative style I spoke about earlier, and applies it to a mid-90s style web browser. The Stanley Parable uses comedy as a means of deconstructing how we engage with the medium of video games, heavily utilising the idea of player choice. Kid Icarus Uprising has all the heroes and villains of the story hanging out in what is essentially a Discord call, talking about what the player is doing, amongst other things.
Wouldn't it be nice to be a goldfish?
Why do you say that?
It would be so easy.
I don't know. My goldfish never lasted very long.
And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of video games that I've never played, let alone heard of, that are funny. But being funny is difficult. Game development is difficult. Making a video game that's funny, not a video game that has funny writing during cutscenes or whatever, but a video game that is actually funny to play, is incredibly difficult, and I don't think people appreciate just how much of a challenge that is. So I think we need to really appreciate that more. Appreciate video games that can be funny just through gameplay. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how developers can continue pushing this medium, can continue being funny, especially just through the very simple act of playing a video game. Huge shout out to my friends Bad Fudge Guy, Yusei Kaiba, and Black Shuck for joining me for some Games of Peak and helping me get some footage. If you want to check out some of their content, which I highly recommend you do, there'll be links in the description below.